I were him, I'd probably make Shabana Mahmood Chancellor, because I think she is a very effective minister, but doing something that a lot of Labour supporters do not like at the moment, in terms of sort of the immigration reforms that are being pushed through. Okay. So you'd get the benefits of her in a different type of setting. And it would allow him to appoint someone else to the Home Office.
But let's now have a look at what the kind of options are on the table. And delighted to be joined by a really brilliant thinker on policy, Sam Freedman. Sam's a former advisor to Michael Gove. He's now a senior fellow at the Institute for Government. He wrote a brilliant book called Failed State, looking at all the things that are sort of broken across how Whitehall works and why governing has got so difficult. He's also the author of Comment is Freed, which is a very good Substack. Sam, I've done enough blowing smoke there. God, I want to cut. I feel like I'm your agent, honestly. Also, Sam and I used to a really good podcast together back in the day. Sam, how are you doing? First of all, how's your head coping with just what's happened in the last week? Because I just started my show by saying it feels like we've all just slightly glossed over that on Monday we lost our sixth Prime Minister in 10 years. How are you feeling about it?
I think it had become so inevitable that everyone's sort of moved past it very, very quickly. It's been pretty clear for quite a long time that he was doomed, I thought, and the moment that Burnham got such a big majority in Makerfield, that was certain. So I just think everyone knew it was coming. So unlike some of the Tory ones, which happened a bit more dramatically, this one felt almost like it overstayed its welcome by the time.
God, okay, very harsh, but there you go. So look, everybody is speculating about Andy Burnham and his policy entry. What do you think is going to be sort of at the top of his entry, and which direction do you think he'll go on big things like? Let's start with the economy.
So on the economy, obviously he's changing prime ministers doesn't change the fiscal situation. He's still going to be inheriting a situation where we've got a lot of areas where people want to spend more money, defence being the one that's been in the news recently, and there isn't very much money to go around. He said he's going to stick within the fiscal rules. He said he doesn't want to raise the taxes that the Labour manifesto promised not to raise. So he's pretty constrained when it comes to spending money on anything. I think you might get a lot of symbolic chat about public ownership, with some meaningful sort of substance behind that. I wouldn't be surprised if Thames Water was nationalised pretty quickly, for instance. But there's going to be a lot of rhetoric about the kind of state that he might want to see, but it's going to be quite slow going to get there because of the fiscal constraints.
What about things like, speaking with a bunch of MPs last night who, some were supportive of him, others were sort of less so, more kind of, few Starmer loyalists still around. And they were saying, look, how is he going to do something big and totemic, which will give something to the left and signal something to the country that change? And everybody was saying, well, what about water? Thames Water seems the obvious one. That seems like a symbolic thing. Lots of people are really cross with water. But that would cost a lot of money. I mean, where would the money come from for that, Sam?
It doesn't. Thames Water doesn't necessarily cost that much money because it's already broke. So you don't have to pay for the assets. You can just sort of take them over. It's not free. There is a cost to it, but it's not like taking over some of the other water companies that are going concerns, where there would be more of a cost to it. So I don't think you would need a lot of cash to do it, which is why I think it's going to be an attractive option for him. Obviously, you're then responsible for running Thames Water, which means people start blaming you when things go wrong rather than a water company. So there is plenty of risk associated with it. But I think the reason I think it's going to happen is because, unlike some of the other things he could do, there isn't that much cost that would threaten the fiscal rules.
And what about any tax changes, sort of equalising capital gains tax with income tax, any other tax rises that you think we should look out for?
Yeah, so some of his supporters, some of the people who've been working on policy around him have proposed equalising capital gains. The problem with doing that is you create massive behavioural effects. Essentially, people behave differently because of the existence of a higher tax rate. So you wouldn't get the kind of revenue that some people think you might get from doing that. It's also a pretty strong anti-growth signal, which I don't think he would want to send early on. So I think there's going to be quite a lot of caution on tax, but you might get something, say, like an increase in the mansion tax that Rachel Reeves introduced last year, which was set at a fairly low level. You might get a tax on bank profits, which Rachel Reeves decided not to do in the budget last year, but would be politically popular. So there are a few options around, but he doesn't have that much room, I think, to raise taxes.
What about sort of looking at council tax again?
I mean, going into the sort of world of property tax, there's plenty of logical, rational things you could do on property tax, abolishing stamp duty and replacing it with a different type of tax, really looking at council tax. It's just that it's like the third rail of British politics. Go after people's houses and you're going to get into trouble. Well, at least the middle class's houses. So again, you might get a sort of long-term review of property taxation, but I don't think you're going to get anything particularly quickly. They might look at giving mayors more control over taxation.
Right. And this is something that you and I talked a lot about in our brilliant podcast, The Power Test, anyway, available if we want to have a little look. In fact, Jim O'Neill was the first person we interviewed, actually, who's advising Andy Burnham now on all things economics. But we spoke to mayors as well, and this idea of like devolving, particularly some tax raising powers, which was something that the mayors were very keen on, Andy Burnham was very keen on. So Rachel Reeves was less keen on this. Do you think this will happen?
So Rachel Reeves did set up a review into the sort of technical term is fiscal devolution last year, the budget. So there is a kind of process already going on looking at what might be possible. I think Burnham will want to push that further and faster. There are lots of technical problems around devolving tax powers, but there are some things you could do quite quickly, like allowing mayors to keep more of the business taxes from their area, that I think we will probably hear about next week as a sort of early announcement. Yeah, I mean, because of his experience as Mayor of Manchester, he is a genuine convert to devolution. Yeah. And that is, I think, where we're going to see a lot of the initial policy focus.
And that could be sort of a quick win, which is very much on brand for him with everything that he's done, and again is interesting, doesn't cost a huge amount of money. Something that is going to need furnishing with a lot of cash is defence spending. What do you think he can do on that, Sam?
I think, he's kind of indicated through briefing that he is going to give more money to the MOD than Starmer was willing to do. You're probably not talking about vast sums of money, maybe 3-4 billion more a year than Starmer offered. So it's findable, but you're going to have to find it by either salami slicing other people's budgets or deciding not to do something, on energy or transport. So I suspect he will feel like it's going to be positioned as a big test of his seriousness. So he will do something more on defence, and will probably find the money through salami slicing other departments, which is how it tends to be.
You don't think he'll say that actually this is something that we can tweak our fiscal rules on, because you can argue that investing in defence will actually boost growth? It's not sort of day-to-day spending so much.
I think he's made a decision to stick with the fiscal rules for now. I mean, he's said so multiple times. I think he knows that there's this sort of noise around bond markets and whether they trust him and who he's going to appoint as Chancellor and so on. And he's trying to give a clear signal that he's not going to start spending loads of money and borrowing loads more money. So I think he will stick to the fiscal rules for now. I do think they may look at doing some technical amendments to the fiscal rules over time that would allow them to spend more money on capital investments, whether that's taking over water companies or building transport, because you could do that, but it would require changing the rules, which he has ruled out.
Okay. And then the other, of course, big issue that Keir Starmer struggled with, and Rachel Reeves and Liz Kendall, was welfare reform. The first bit of Alan Milburn's report, which was setting out the diagnosis, landed pretty well. There was broad kind of cross-party consensus that his analysis was right. There was even agreement, I'd say, across the Labour Party, even from people who had been against the welfare reforms, people like Meg Hillier, who led the rebellion. But this feels like it's quite an important issue for Andy Burnham and his team to show that they can get a grip on, because it was a big failing for the last administration. What do you think he can do on welfare reform?
Well, I think what Milburn will propose is essentially a deal whereby you reduce benefits eligibility for that age group in return for a lot more support around technical training, around support for work placements. The challenge with it is going to be that you can't withdraw the benefits until you've put in the support. So there's an upfront cost before you get the saving. And the Treasury tends to be pretty grumpy about that kind of proposal. So I think Burnham will have a big choice to make as to whether he, again, in this difficult context where there's not a lot of money around, does he try and find a bit to set up a process that Labour MPs can buy into that will reduce the benefits bill over time. And that's probably going to be a focus of his first budget later this year.
And look, the other thing that Andy Burnham, when he was last in Cabinet, he was the Health Secretary, and there was big cross-party talks on social care, these still not talks. They sort of all ended up collapsing. But he has said that he has long supported the idea of a sort of national care service. Is that something that he's likely to... I know Louise Casey's looking into this as well, but is this something that he, do you think, would like to focus on? And again, how expensive would that be?
Yes, it is something he would like to focus on. The Casey review is not due to report for quite a while because Starmer's government was trying to kick it into the long grass. He has the option of bringing it forward. I think Louise Casey would be quite happy to bring it forward. I think a lot of the work has been done. But again, you end up with a series of quite difficult trade-offs. Do you go back to the kind of Theresa May policy of making people use more of the value of their houses to in return for more financial support on social care? Do you put more money into essentially nationalising a lot of care homes which are private? Again, all of these things either expensive or politically contentious. So it's kind of easy to say I want public ownership, I want to sort out social care. It's once you start getting into the details of these things in very financially constrained circumstances that it starts to get very difficult.
And look, final question to you, Sam. The big sort of debate that's going on at the moment is, who's going to be the Chancellor, and that will tell a story. But that bleeds into the bigger sort of meta question, which is Andy Burnham going to go left? Is he going to sort of tilt left? And we heard from Clive Efford earlier, who said he's definitely going to tilt left. What do you think?
I think it kind of depends on the issue. I think when it comes to economics, he's certainly, I think, going to push a line about public ownership, which you can see as being more left, more than Starmer and Reeves did. But, we've talked about more defence spending, reducing welfare benefits. In other areas, he might be looking to do things that are associated with the right, or which the right have been pushing for. I don't think he's a hugely ideological person in terms of a left-right spectrum. I think he's trying to find a way to build Labour's political coalition back up again. And that means you can't only get support from the left, you also need to get support from people who are more in the centre, who would be nervous about a very kind of green-like Labour government. So I think he'll be fairly cautious when it comes to ideology, and you'll see a kind of mix of different signals.
And who do you think should be Chancellor? Other than your good self. They should put you in the Lords and make you Chancellor.
So if I were him, I'd probably make Shabana Mahmood Chancellor, because I think she is a very effective minister, but doing something that a lot of Labour supporters do not like at the moment, in terms of sort of the immigration reforms that are being pushed through. Okay. So you'd get the benefits of her in a different type of setting. And it would allow him to appoint someone else to the Home Office. So that's what I would do if I was him. But who knows what he will end up doing.
Sam, great to speak to you as ever. That's Sam Freedman, and he brilliant policy brain there, senior fellow at the Institute for Government.